Wow. Easy. Frankenbeans. Easy.
Hey,
That was a lot. That was a lot in my head, my ears, my ear holes. Last time we recorded, the sound pads didn't work, so I don't know if they're going to work this time or not. Because I could hear it,
If they don't work, we're firing on our engineer.
which is me, I guess.
Yes, it is you.
Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Hey! Perfect. That was perfect. That was so good.
If it can be heard, it may not be able to be heard. I don't know what happened with the recording last time. Sound pads were not. Riverside did not use the sound pads. Something happened with the
Sounds to
audio.
me like you need to get it together, Riverside.
Well, we're paying $0 for it, so
Okay, maybe we need to get it together.
I did think about
Investors could be you.
I did think about doing the at least like trying it for a month. It's more expensive if you pay for it per month versus like per year.
Right.
But I thought about trying it like for a month because the sample rate is off between like the free version and like the sample rate of our mixer. They're not the same. So that could be one reason why the audio is a little not as good as if we just recorded ourselves with the software on here. So, anywho, enough technical
We're working on it, man.
nonsensory. What's the beverage of choice? What you got?
This is blueberry pie Java coffee. So I don't even know the brand. It's TJ Maxx special, you know. TJ Maxx, you never know what you're going to find. So I think it's called Sweetie Pie, the brand. I don't know, but it's blueberry pie coffee, and it is very good. It's mucho good. Very good. Muy delicioso.
This is pretty good. This is a Summit brand, which is an Aldi brand energy drink.
Nice.
It's pineapple and starfruit. I think is the flavor.
Very interesting.
It's delicious.
So I'm drinking coffee. You're drinking an energy drink. It's almost 8 o'clock in the PM, so we're about to be jacked up. We are about to be ready.
Actually, I'm probably going to be able to go right directly to sleep.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
that's okay.
I'm quite tired.
I don't know if the lights, if the colors of our pineapple are coming through or not, but
it's there.
But we have this.
But we have it.
We got this.
Feast your eyes.
Well, how we want to kick this thing off? We don't have any sort of direction or topic or anything really.
No, really, we don't. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the only thing that, as far as kicking it off, that I kind of just wanted to say was, you know, because today it's been kind of a long, hard day for us, because my Uncle Tim has passed away, and his visitation was today, and his funeral is tomorrow. So I just wanted to say, you know, a little something about him, and well, which really that's just it. It's just that, you know, I just want to recognize him, and I'm gonna miss him a lot. You know, he was a good man, and he was one of those guys that he was a quiet dude.
Yeah.
He didn't have a lot of words. He wasn't like eloquently spoken, but also like when he did speak, there was a wisdom behind it that you knew you should listen to. You know, like those are the kind of people like when they don't talk a lot, but when they talk,
You should probably listen.
right.
Yeah.
Just always, you know, he wasn't a guy that had a lot in his life as far as like worldly possessions. That wasn't the focus of his life, you know, like, but he worked hard, spent his whole life working hard, and, you know, had 2 daughters and a wife, and now has grandchildren. And, Yeah, he's a good guy, man. He's going to be missed. I know I've got a lot of memories of from my childhood. Mostly, I spent a lot of time in the summers when we weren't in school. My mom would, because my uncle Tim and my granddad owned a business together, and so my mom would help them out. And so in the summers, I would go over there and I would work with them some in their shop, and then they also did farming, so I would help them on the farm, and just a lot of memories from my childhood. You know, that sort of
Right.
that I don't know, childhood memories hit a little different. So he's a central figure in those childhood memories. So it's been a hard one, but
Yeah.
he was 62. So really it's too young.
Yeah.
Cancer. It's a devil. So
It is a devil.
anyway, I just wanted to say a little something about him and you know, just say I love him and I miss him.
Yeah.
So that's what I've got going on. At least that's been the week. You know, I think it was Sunday night was when we kind of got the message that he was going to be sent home from the hospital. He'd been in the hospital for about a week, and we got the message that he was going to be sent home on hospice. Like it was just make him as comfortable as you can. You know,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I got to go by and see him. You know, one more time before he passed. The night before he passed, after work, I stopped by and got to see him. He didn't know I was there because he was asleep, but
Yeah.
you know, got to see him one more time. So,
Right.
but yeah. So it's been kind of heavy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well.
that's that. So we have tomorrow will be the funeral. That'll be a hard day. That'll be a heavy day, but it's part of life. What
Yeah.
else? You can't do anything about it. You know, it just makes you. Those are the kind of the kind of things that happen in your life that just make you realize the importance of the moments that you spend with people. You know, it's so easy just to it's like on one hand we have the intellectual knowledge that one day those either you're not going to be here or those people that you're spending those moments with aren't going to be here. And you like have the intellectual knowledge of it, but we get so caught up in our life that you forget the sacredness of each moment that you spend with somebody, you know. Just trying to keep that level-headedness about it of like don't take for granted any moment that you get to spend with people or you know neglect to spend time with someone because you get too caught up in your life and too busy because every person that I've lost in my life, you know, that's passed on, that's the one thing is always like, man, I wish I would have spent more time with them. Or when I did spend time with them, I wish I was more present in the moment, actually realizing the sacredness of the time that I had, you know?
Right.
So that's something that's been on my mind a lot with what's, you know, occurred with our family with this, you know, this passing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's easy to think about when you have a kid because I mean, I probably think about it too much really, but I always just realize like I don't know how much time I've got with him, you know. So just trying to be present with that, but it's harder I think to realize with the people the further out from your inner circle that you get, you know, from your kids and your wife to your parents and then your grandparents and your aunts and uncles and cousins and friends and you know the further out you go, it's harder to realize that you know, even every moment that we live is special and sacred, and maybe it's the last one that you're going to get with that person. So
Right.
we need to embrace that moment and just be present with it. So
Yeah. Which we talked about this a little bit last night,
yeah,
and like, you know, the just the concept of death itself, and you know, and how that, you know, how we think about the afterlife and or don't think about it, or you know, because you know, I know the one thing you brought up last night was how we can one way in which we can find ourselves neglecting the or just not even recognizing or thinking about the sacredness of those moments is it's like, oh, I'm going to see him again one day,
right.
you know, and that's um while I believe that's true, um I do think that we should like slow down sometimes. Like we need to be um, more aware of those moments while we're in them,
Right.
and take stock of that, and like just recognize, like, you know, this is an important moment that once it's gone, it's gone. You
Right.
know, like that is an important thing.
Yeah, I don't think uh, to your point about like living or looking forward to an afterlife and thinking through it and allowing that to minimize the importance of the moment that you're living currently. I mean, I think it's fine to have a hope for the afterlife and to have a conception of it, but ultimately, like, we don't know what happens. We don't know what that looks like. I mean, it's not even something that's talked about very much in scripture.
Right, as far as like what it looks like and all that. Yeah.
Right. So we don't know. I mean, we have our own understandings and our own interpretations of the scriptures that we do have, and our own thoughts. And people have had near death experiences that you can like read about or listen to, and who knows how much stock you can put into that or you can't. But like at the end of the day, we don't know what that looks like. Like,
Yeah.
and I think, like, again, I think it's fine to have a hope, and it's fine to have a theology that includes that, but you can't just neglect the present moment in the hope of a future that may or may not be there. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this moment is real that you're experiencing, and beyond this moment, we don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where like it comes down to like a faith. It's a faith issue,
Right.
because like I don't, in that respect, I don't know anything.
Right.
As far as like, what do you know? I don't. Well, I mean, the whole point of having faith is that I don't know.
Right.
You know.
And
So
that's what I mean is it's fine to have faith. In fact, I think it's a good thing to have faith. I have faith. You know what I mean? Like I think that's a good thing. But I don't think that we can allow our faith to cause us to neglect what we're currently experiencing. You know what I
right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
that. I think that all I'm trying to say is I think that you have to have that balance there.
Yeah. Right. That's the thing. It has to be a balance. You have to. I think both are necessary. You need to be present and live here and now, while also having faith and hope for the future. And that goes beyond just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know I don't know where we want to go.
We can go anywhere.
Because what I was thinking about is what I said to you last night, which was like, like this moment between me and you right now where we're having this conversation, like this is a sacred moment. This is a thing that like, you know, Christ is in us and with us and all around us, and is like, this is the holy moment. Every moment is like a holy moment in one sense,
Right.
but like somewhere in the world right now, there's someone who's currently experiencing something horrendous.
Right.
Some evil is happening somewhere in the world right now as we're sitting here in the comfort of your basement, you know, talking through these things. There's someone who is being murdered or abused,
Right.
you know. That's And so like a lot of this stuff with the afterlife and stuff like that, like it plays so much into my understanding of the problem of evil that, I think that was something else that just came to mind just now when we talked about it last night, was that I think we have to insist that that moment that someone is experiencing right now as we speak, that it will not stand for all of eternity. That like once, like that the person who is doing this evil will be brought to justice, and the person that is experiencing that evil will have justice, and like there will be, but not just that, but like healing and reconciliation, where like that situation, whatever it is, like there will be true justice done, and that there will be um healing and reconciliation and wholeness, salvation, sozo. You know, I think that we have to insist on that, and I don't know how that works unless there's some sort of after,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So that is definitely something that's really important to me, because it plays so much into the problem of evil. And you know, if there is nothing else after this, then I don't know what that would mean as far as like my understanding of like
Right.
God and creation, and because the problem of evil is such a big problem.
Right.
You know, like it
Right.
really is. And I don't think it's one you could actually solve, but that part of this piece of the puzzle to me is so integral to the whole of my thinking and belief on this. It's part of the reason I believe in universal salvation. It's part of the reason I'm a universalist,
Right.
and a Christian universalist, is like, because what happens there, if you know, that evil that happens can't extend into eternity. That person that committed the evil can't just
Right.
not, justice can't just not be served.
Right.
Because the lesson is never learned, the punishment is never fulfilled, the you know, justice is never satisfied.
Right.
If someone is in hell for all of eternity, and the person that, because punishing someone for doing something wrong doesn't necessarily, it may make you feel better, but it doesn't necessarily bring wholeness or healing
Right.
or reconciliation between
Right.
those. And I just can't imagine, oh, that not being the case. You know, I think a lot of people think that like this whole ultimate redemption, Christian universalism, whatever you want to call it, I think a lot of people think that it's just about that. We're saying that there's no justice, there's no punishment,
Right.
there's no wrath, quote unquote, that there's no like, that it's all just like, well, like Augustine put it, we're um, soft-hearted, I think is how he said it,
Right.
in reference to those who,
Yeah, it's just it's an easier pill to swallow. So that's
right,
which is the way it's painted. I would actually argue it's not an easier pill to swallow, but
no,
especially not if you're one who's experienced those injustices at the hands of another.
yeah,
Then it can seem like you may feel like you're not getting your eye for an eye. You
right,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Like that's actually easier from our perspective, from our worldly perspective.
yeah,
That's part of what drives me nuts about that whole argument. It's like, no, what are you talking about? Turning the other cheek isn't the easy way.
yeah,
The easy way is decking them back. Like the
right, yeah,
easy way is to take an eye for an eye.
yeah. It is not easy to love your enemies,
Right.
and it's not easy to forgive all of the time. But Jesus said, if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. That's a hard saying, man.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
a hard saying.
And
Jesus said a lot of hard stuff.
it's a hard saying for me, and I've never ever really experienced any sort of real
Yeah,
traumas or hardships or injustices at the hands of other people. You know what I mean? Like
right.
I'm in the scope of people that exist in the world. I am the privileged of the privileged. I mean,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like I can only imagine, and it's hard for me to forgive people. So I
Yeah.
can only imagine if you're someone who's really experienced trauma at the hands of another, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and I don't want to be insensitive to, like, if there are people that are listening, watching that have experienced that, like, I don't want to be insensitive to that.
Right, absolutely.
But I'm just trying to speak truthfully, about it. And Jesus does say, like, if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. And like, and in forgiving someone, man, sometimes that, like, I heard a story one time, and I'll never forget this story. It was, I can't remember who it was that I heard the story from. It was on a podcast. It was on one of David Artman's podcasts, Grace Saves All. He had someone on that told this story, but I can't remember his name. Anyway, he told a story about how he was doing, I think he was doing some sort of counseling or something with a man who was in prison, or had been in prison, and he actually raped his
Right.
own daughter,
Yeah.
and which is just a horrendous thing to do.
Right.
Right. Like, I don't know if you can even imagine something worse than that.
Right.
But yeah. So that's what he did. And, he was, he was wanting to make things right. And, he was, was trying to be, follow Jesus or whatever, and was trying to be he wanted to be saved, but I think he didn't really think he could, and he had so much guilt,
Right.
And this is a really long way of getting to this, but this is the point right here. He said that the most painful experience he experienced in his whole life was when his daughter forgave him
Right.
for what he did to her. Man, sometimes, as hard as it is for you to forgive, sometimes that's even harder for,
Yeah.
if you're someone who has done something that's that terrible, and you already have that much shame and guilt, sometimes, and you don't think that you're worthy of that forgiveness, someone giving that forgiveness to you, it's like the whole heaping coals of fire on their head kind of deal.
Exactly.
It's like, in one sense, that's a punishment in and of itself. Sometimes forgiving someone,
But it's a healing
yes,
punishment, a restorative punishment.
right,
It can be punishment, and it can be hurtful, and it can be painful, but it's restorative.
right,
It's not retributive,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. And so, yeah, I know we kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I basically just brought all that up to say, like, it recognize those moments for what they are.
Yeah.
Be present in these moments, and don't take them for granted. But also be hopeful
Yeah.
for the future.
I think that you have to, with that hope, though, yes, I agree 100%. But I think with the hope for the future, it also has to come with an acknowledgement that we don't know 100% what that means. To say, because we've only ever existed to our knowledge, in this fallen existence that we currently have. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
like, what does it look like to say all things will be made right? We don't even know. Like,
Right, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, we can have our own ideas and thoughts, and they're all hopeful, right? Because in the end, the hope is that all things will be made right. But what does that look like? I don't know.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. So, like, I mean, I think that I'm hopeful in afterlife. I'm hopeful, and I do believe that all things will be made right. But also, I don't know what that means necessarily. Like, if somebody was to ask me, what does that mean to say that all things will be made right, or are made right, since it is finished? I don't necessarily know, but I believe it, and I believe it it's far above his ways are far above my ways, but only in a better and more loving way than I can even conceptualize it.
Right.
So I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like, but I believe and I trust. Ultimately, that's what that is trust to say, I don't know. I can't even conceptualize it in my own brain, but I trust God that things will work out for the best because he's only has our good good intentions for us and what's best.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, this is the first time that we've recorded in quite a while because you skipped out on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you, well, it was Valentine's weekend.
Yeah.
You were being a good husband.
Yeah, me and the wife took a long weekend.
Right.
Went up to the Smoky Mountains.
In the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah. Went up to Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area. Sevierville,
Sevierville.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, only reason why I brought that up is because I know that you had an experience there that we were, well, one particular experience that we were talking about a little bit today that I know that you had planned on mentioning on the pod.
I had planned on mentioning it, but things have been very serious so far.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if I should just completely change gears or not.
Oh, I've already changed them. Now we're already headed that
Well,
direction.
all right then. So here's what happened.
The description of the show is that we're a couple of silly geese, okay?
Well, so I went to the store. It's Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg. It's a very interesting.
Yeah, it
It's a
is.
very interesting place because I get the vibe from the people there that live there, at least, that it kind of seems like it's a little bit more of a. Maybe it's a little bit more progressive, a little bit more. I don't know. I get.
And that's all relative, okay? This is in Eastern Tennessee.
You're right.
So when you say a little more progressive, you're talking about in comparison to the rest of Tennessee. Like, it's still the South.
Right. Yeah. But like it's just interesting because like if you look at like it seems like a lot of the shops and stuff like that are catering to they know their audience.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not represent the people that actually live there and work there all the time.
Right.
Is what I'm getting at with that. But I could just be off on that anyway. But there's like several Trump stores there. That's all they have. It's like Trump. It's like a Trump superstore there.
It's so weird.
That is so
weird.
Right?
Like, even if you like the guy, you just pause. You have to admit that's weird, right?
Yeah, like just I mean, him as a figure is just, it's bonkers what he has become.
I know.
You know, like there was never I don't remember there being an Obama superstore anywhere.
I don't remember. Maybe it existed. I don't know. And it would, but if it did, then that would have been weird too.
Right. But it's like, wow, that's just crazy, first of all. And there's more now than there was last time I went. Like, there was some last time we went there, but there's like more of them now. But we went into this store in Gatlinburg, and I can't remember the name of it, but it had like a very religious name. Even the name of the store, I think, had and it was like tons. They had worship music playing in there, and it was essentially a Christian nationalist like wet dream. It was
that's the phrasing that you used when you sent it to me. So
it was like a Christian nationalist paradise in there.
yeah, the Garden of Eden for Christian nationalists.
Yes, there was like cherubim at the door and everything. It was pretty crazy, like seeing it, like seeing how much, like just that mixing of politics and Christianity, and just seeing it in that store, like it's there for a reason. People are buying it, right?
Yeah.
It was just an interesting experience.
I guess, and maybe I I probably don't keep up with some of the like more recent happenings than I should. I don't watch the news and stuff like that. Like I don't watch TV usually. Like I don't have a lot of time for that. In case if I do, me and Kel will sit down and watch something on Netflix or something.
Yeah.
But I don't really keep up with all that stuff. But I think things have gotten so much more extreme in that regard than I ever even realized. Like just watching the most recent episode of the New Evangelicals. Well, actually, I think it was the Tim and April shows, which is a completely new thing that they're doing. But it was about a lot of the. I haven't even finished the episode yet, but a lot of it was about that same sort of thing. And I was like, man, I didn't even realize. Like the one that blew me away. They showed this video of this lady who was doing, those like demonstrative paintings. I've seen them done in churches before where there'll be like worship music playing and somebody's up there just really painting away. And then they'll like turn it around and show the audience and then flip it upside down. And it's really a picture of Jesus that like they don't see it until they turn it and flip it. And then you're like, oh, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But like somebody was doing that. And I don't even know where this was because it was a huge place with a huge crowd, but there was worship music playing, and it was really weird for me because it's a song that we play at church, and it's one I really like. Like it really, it
was at a church, I think.
Yeah, I don't know, but it seemed like it was a church. But I mean, the lady was painting and doing the thing, even like taking breaks from the painting to like raise her hands in worship of God and all this, and then like when she does she reveals the painting, it's a picture of Donald Trump, not Jesus, and I was like,
yeah.
This is so weird,
right? It is weird,
and I'm saying that like it's another level of weird to me because I don't think that I think he's not. I'm trying to be kind here, but I don't think he's a very Christ-like figure. I think he's the opposite. Let's just say. But even if he was, it's still weird,
right? Yeah, like I don't care who you voted for,
right?
That's kind of weird, like. I mean, I think, exactly. I think it's weird either way.
Yeah, even if
you're a fan,
even if you think he's a great Christian man, which confuses the heck out of me. But even if that's the case, it still should come across as odd,
right?
And it really does. Like in that, they kind of made a parody of that. I think April posted it on her Instagram where she took the video of that, but she removed the audio and put the background audio from the old school 10 Commandments movie whenever Moses comes off the mountain and he sees the golden calf.
Right.
And it fit so perfectly. It was so scary.
Yeah.
It's just, that's how the stuff comes across to me, man. It's so weird. Like, and I didn't realize it was to that point, I guess. Like, I'm too sheltered. I knew it was bad. We were already talking. Me and you've already had Christian nationalist conversations. We've already talked about it, but it's even worse than I thought it was.
And we used that example in that episode specifically about the golden calf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
crazy.
It is weird, man. I don't know. It's even what makes it even crazier is if you really pay attention to the Jesus story. Like it wasn't just. We like to try to make things way more simple than they really are. But in the gospel accounts of Jesus' life and death, it wasn't just the Jewish people, the Jewish authority, the Sanhedrin that crucified Jesus. But it also wasn't just the Romans that crucified Jesus. They came together. The religious authority and the political authority came together and in this unholy union of religion and politics. That's who killed Jesus. That's who crucified Jesus.
Right.
So the fact that we are now marrying the two together in this way that we are is just so mind-blowing to me. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Because am I wrong on that? Like to me, that's the story. That's the obvious point of the story. Like the Jewish authority, the Sanhedrin wanted to kill Jesus because they were angry at him because they thought that he was blaspheming, that he was making himself equal to God for his blasphemy, and they felt he was leading people astray, right? They thought he was a heretic, that he was a false teacher who was leading people away from the truth. So they wanted to get rid of him. The Romans were worried because he was getting popular. And they were already dealing with lots of insurrections and stuff. A lot of attempted overthrows. So these two guys, the religious authority and the political authority, have a common enemy in Jesus. They come together and they kill him.
Yeah.
But we're doing the same thing, like
Right.
with the Christian nationalist stuff, marrying the two together.
Yeah. And nowhere was that more clear to me than in this random store on this main strip there in Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
And some of those, like some of the stuff in there, you almost have to laugh at it. It's so over the top cheesy,
Right.
and just ludicrous.
Yeah.
I don't even remember. Oh, what was the one shirt that you sent me in a picture? It was Jesus was also found guilty in a sham trial, and I still follow him, or something like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, oh my God! Like, how do you not see in that situation? You are literally equating Trump to Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, there's been multiple books written where they say that, where they're making that comparison outright between Trump and Jesus. I can't think of the name of the titles, but there's a couple books that have been written
Yeah.
where people have done exactly that,
Right.
comparing Trump to Jesus.
Yeah, I think the closest comparison to Trump in the Bible is probably that almost fatal head wound that can be found in the book of Revelation.
I mean, you're not wrong. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, all my whole life I've been told like to be on the lookout for like I've been like on the, like watching, like wondering who the Antichrist is going to be
Right.
and all that, and like there's all these signs and all these things that are like, this is who the Antichrist is going to be. It's like, well, if you pay attention to that list,
Yes.
I don't know, man.
Right.
That being said, I don't actually believe Trump is the Antichrist.
I don't believe
But-
it. I also don't, because I don't believe there is the Antichrist
Right.
necessarily.
Yeah, me
But
either.
like, I think that he fits the role.
I think that he is Antichrist in a lot of ways,
Right.
as in like says or does the opposite of what Christ would say or do.
Right.
But
Anyway, I mean, to me, the whole point.
sometimes I do too.
Right, absolutely. The whole point to me, though, isn't even like, to me, it's not about Republican or Democrat. It's not about conservative or progressive. I think you can have whatever politics that you have. That's
Right.
not the same thing as equating a politician to Jesus,
Yeah.
or in a way worshiping him as if he's a Christ figure.
So I don't follow this stuff enough to know, like, that shirt that talked about a sham trial. What is that even in reference to?
I mean, because that was the whole thing. That's why a lot of the most ardent supporters of Trump don't care that he's a felon. They don't care, because to them it was a sham trial from the beginning. It was set up by the political opponents just to make him look bad politically. It was all just a farce. So it was a sham trial.
But I don't even follow it enough to know what he was on trial for.
Oh,
That's
it
what I'm
was
saying.
assault or some I don't know what the actual like.
Was that in reference to the sexual allegations
I'm pretty sure.
that he was found liable of
I'm pretty sure.
against the lady? And then
I
he
mean,
had
again,
to
I've
pay
already
her and apologize to the judge.
I've already admitted in this episode I also don't follow it that much, but yeah,
I didn't know if it was in reference to that or not.
it could have been any number of things. Quite frankly, the fact that you even have to ask that question should be an indication of like which one. It's not a matter of what; it's a matter of which one.
Okay. Am I taking crazy pills, or is that like? I mean, just think about that. That makes that comparison so much worse, right?
Yes, it does.
What is Jesus? If we're comparing Jesus and saying that Jesus and Trump both were found guilty in sham trials and sentenced or whatever, or what? Actually, I don't know that. I mean, anyway. So like, Jesus is Jesus, right? Jesus.
Yeah, Yeshua.
He healed the sick, opened the eyes of the blind,
Right.
set the captives free, proclaimed good news to the poor, the oppressed, the downtrodden.
Right.
He was arrested, and they killed him because they thought that, you already went through it, that he proclaimed to be God, all these things. It was a threat to the power of the Sanhedrin and the Romans. Trump was accused of sexually assaulting a woman.
Right.
How is that a fair comparison?
Right. And again, I don't even know if that is the one thing that they're talking about it being a sham trial. But again, the fact that you even have to ask that question means there's been multiple things. Like, it could just take your pick. Like,
Right. I mean, it's just, and I'm not even so I'm not even necessarily like an anti. I know this might shock some people listening to. I'm not an anti-Trump guy. I'm not I'm not a liberal. I'm not woke.
right.
I'm not a progressive. I don't consider myself any of that. I actually consider myself a little bit more conservative leaning. I'm sort of like, I'm in the center, and whether I'm right or left of center depends on the day. But I'm pretty well a centrist, so I'm not even like someone who's like real like anti-Republican or anti-Trump or anything. I've voted Republican, and every single time I've voted since I've been eligible to vote, I've voted Republican.
Right.
But come on, guys,
I have not.
But like, if that's the comparison, if that's really what people are trying, just think about the absurdity of that comparison. Jesus being sentenced to death and dying for the entire world because of this sham trial versus Trump sexually assaulting a woman. That's the comparison? It's insane.
It is insane. It really is insane. And that's why I was trying to say, like, to me, it's not even about your politics. Like, I don't care if you're a Republican or you're a conservative or your politics disagrees with mine. Like, I don't know. I'm just a normal dude. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm wrong about my politics. Like, I tend to be more of I actually consider myself a centrist, even though most people, but I would also consider myself a progressive leaning. But unfortunately, most people would view me as a radical leftist because the prism has shifted so far to the right that my moderate stance appears to be radical left when I would argue that it's not.
And I think the same could be said on the other side too. It's like, I really do think that the extremes on right and left are so extreme now that anyone who's even sniffing at the center is considered.
Yeah, maybe. I think yes. I think that both sides have the gap between the right and the left has expanded. I don't think it's a 1-for-1 though, for me personally, because I mean, again, if you look at like, I guess this is getting a little more political than I thought we were going to with it, but like, I do kind of want to say this. Like, if you look at like the important issues of the day, on almost every single issue, I'm right in the middle, maybe slightly tending progressive, because like, Second Amendment rights, I'm not a hardcore liberal on that. Like, I support the Second Amendment, but I think that we could do more to keep firearms out of the hands of people that don't need to have them. That's a moderate position. I'm not extremely left. I don't think that everybody should have to give their guns away. I don't think that.
Right.
But I'm also not extremely right, because I think there are some things that we can do. I don't think there should just be unregulated, anybody can have one. There's more that we could do. That's a middle position. Like on abortion, which is another hot button topic. Like, I do tend to lean progressive on that, but I don't think that anybody should just all the way up to their day of conception or their day of birth be able to just abort their pregnancy. Like, right. I'm okay and think there probably should be some legislation around it and restrictions to it, but I tend to lean more towards a woman's bodily autonomy. So it's not extremely left in that it should be unregulated. Anybody should at any time, but it's also not right. Right. In that we should completely limit it. It's a middle position leaning left.
Right.
On immigration, like, I respect the fact that there needs to be an immigration reform. and that there are laws. Those laws are there for a reason to keep people safe, and they need to be enforced. But I respect people as human beings, and it needs to be done. There are ways to do it in a humane and loving and kind manner, like where we're not separating families and putting people in cages and stuff like that. You know, like that's a moderate position. That's not an open borders, anybody comes, anybody goes, extremely left position. But
Right.
it's also not ICE coming into church services and rounding people up. And you know what I mean? Like that's a middle position. Every single position, I'm a moderate, but I'm looked at as though I'm like a super liberal progressive person, because while both extremes on both ends may have widened out, I do feel like the prism as a whole has shifted to so far to the right that even those middle positions that I hold are come across as liberal positions when they're actually completely right in the middle of the aisle.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
That was a little soapbox. That was a little extra for you. You don't even have to pay extra for that. That one's a freebie on me. But the whole point being, I don't care if what your politics are, if you're right or left or whatever. That's not the point. To me, that's not the absurdity of it. The absurdity of is the figurehead and the way that we have married the religion and the politics and the way that we have elevated this person as a figurehead, as a Christ figure that is celebrated and in a lot of, I would argue, worshipped in a Christ-like way. That's to me what is number one idolatry, and it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's not about, like, not everybody who's even a supporter of Trump acts that way about him.
Yeah.
And if that's you, that's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It was just an interesting experience.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun. I thought, well, fun's not the word. Like I did think it was funny. Like I went into the store and when I saw what was in there, I did laugh. But it's also kind of like, man, like it's probably not something you should laugh at,
Yeah.
actually. Because it's not a good thing that we're blurring those lines so much between where to some folks Republican politics that just is Christianity.
Yeah.
For some people. Not everyone, but like those lines get real blurry, it seems like at times. And like just in that store was just a perfect example of it because like I said, it had like a Christian name. You go in and they're playing worship music. I was singing along. It like one of my favorite songs was playing in there, actually, like a worship song we do at church was playing in there. But I walk in and like there's all kinds of like there's manger scenes, like there's like beautiful artwork where it's like it's got Joseph and Mary and Jesus, and they're like it's all one piece, and it's like hand carved wooden, and it's like beautiful thing, and a lot of the shirts were Christian themed, so like the whole store is like a really Christian thing. But you walk in and there's like pictures of Trump everywhere, and
Right.
like there was one that had like the picture of him, like after the attempted assassination, the famous picture. Everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
And there was a flag hanging up that had Jesus, and it had like all the different like symbols for the various branches of the military on it, and I was just like, man, like the level of Christian nationalism and militarism mixing with Christianity, like seeing it in person like that in that store was just kind of like
Right.
shocking.
I think
a little bit.
it's not just shocking to me, which it is shocking. You're right about that, but I think it's just the danger of it to me is so grave. Because what it really does is to your point, it's completely blurred those lines between politics and religion to the point of where, like, if you view something differently, you're considered a heretic. which is exactly what happened to Jesus. He was out of line with the authorities, both the religious and the political authorities. And it was his threat to their authority that got him killed.
Right.
It seems to, it's not, I think what it does is it ignores the fact that there are half a bazillion different Christian denominations. There's half a bazillion different Christian scripture translations and interpretations. And it tries to uniformize uniformize, that's definitely not a word. Everything as if there's just one way, if there's one under, if you have any conception of Christianity that doesn't fall in line with this, it's a false Christianity.
Right.
Which people do think that, and that's okay. People can think whatever they want, but what makes it dangerous is now it has authority attached to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now it can be enforced.
Right.
Like, that's why I'm vehemently, like, one of my main concerns leading up into this election, and especially now that after Trump has won and with the whole Project 2025 stuff, like, one of my main concerns was the public education system and what was going to happen to it, because I have a son who's going to be starting school in the next couple of years. And, you know, about like because now they're trying, you know, Oklahoma has started doing it, like introducing Bible teachings in public school. And like, that worries me, and which is weird I know people are going to hear that and be blown away by that, because I'm a Christian and who reads the scriptures every day and who loves the scriptures. But it worries me who's going to be teaching it and what slant they're going to be putting on what they're teaching. You know what I mean? Like, that's why, like, when I want my son to learn the Bible, I will send him to Sunday school and like place like Bible teachers that I know and trust.
Like me.
Yes. Not public school instructors, especially if it's going to be this right-wing Christian nationalist version of Christianity. I don't want that ingrained within my son. To me, that's a bad reading of Scripture. It's a bad way to read Scripture. Again, that's just my personal opinion, but it's a bad way to read Scripture, and it's a fake Christianity, in my opinion. It's an antichrist religion. I'll just say that again. That's just my opinion, but I don't want that fake Christianity being ingrained within my impressionable son's brain. You know what I mean? Like, there's authority behind it now, being
Right.
taught in schools, being legislated, which is totally different than people just having an opinion.
Yeah.
To me, that's the danger of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's dangerous in a lot of different ways. Yeah, I don't know. Didn't really intend for us to get too far into all this.
Yeah. You should have known better.
I guess. I just thought it would be a fun story.
Yeah. Well,
Talking about going to the store. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, there's people who have done a far more in-depth work on the whole Christian nationalist thing that know a lot more about it than we do.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was just thinking. Is like I don't really even know what else to say about it at the moment.
Well, and again, though, that's part of our thing as a show is like we've said from the very outset, we're not experts on literally anything.
Right.
We're just two normal guys having a normal guy conversation.
Yeah.
Like, so if you're coming to us to teach you, to be your authority, like, I'm sorry to tell you, but we're probably not the right people for that. We're here to have a conversation, to ask tough questions or to have hard conversations or just have a normal conversation even. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we can have a conversation. These are our thoughts about Christian nationalism and the marrying of Christianity and the authority of government. And these are our thoughts on it. That doesn't necessarily make it right. It doesn't make it the educated position, but it's my viewpoint. It's the way I see it currently, you know?
Right. Yeah. My main beef with all of it is I just want it's all from like the like I don't care about politics, and like I don't have my own kids that are going to be in the school systems. Like I have less worries. Most of my worries are all from like the Christian side of it,
Yeah.
the Christian side of the Christian nationalism thing. Like it's all about like what is the future of Christianity? You know, like what is going to like if I mean I don't I have so many things going through my head right now. So like I know that like at one of I think it was at one of those the festivals, America Fest or something like that. I know that like Donald Trump Jr. was there, and he said something to the effect of, "We tried the turning the other cheek, and it didn't work,"
Right.
implying that it's time to take action now.
Right.
We tried turning the other cheek, didn't work. It's time to take action.
Right.
And like,
Which is in line with the, I don't remember who said it, but is it Russell Moore maybe that said that he'd heard from Christian pastors that when they teach the Sermon on the Mount or like actual red letters from Jesus, they've had people come up to them of like, why are you teaching these liberal talking points at church? And he's like,
yeah,
well, this is red letters. This is the teaching of Jesus.
right,
And the response is like, well, that woke stuff doesn't work anymore. Like,
right.
it's the same thing. Like,
I mean, that's where my concern comes in.
right.
It's I don't care about your politics. I don't care about any of that, really. I care about us following Jesus. Like, if you're going to use this label of Christian, follow Jesus, man. And, like, if you take the words of Jesus like that and just outright toss them aside as ineffective or I mean, what are we doing?
Right.
If that is the future of American Christianity, that concerns the heck out of me.
Right.
That is my concern. My concern is the Church of America and the future of Christianity. We cannot take Jesus' words and just throw them aside because they're hard.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know that you would even agree with the sentiment of this, but I seen a cartoon and I thought it was pretty profound. Again, I don't know that you would even agree with the sentiment of it. I kind of do, actually, unfortunately. But it was a cartoon, and on one it was a cartoon of a tug of war, and on one end there was a person tugging, and it said Jesus, and on the other side there was the other person pulling against Jesus, or I don't think it said Jesus, I think it said Jesus's teachings, and then on the other side pulling against Jesus's teachings, the person was labeled Christian nationalism, and then in the next frame. And in the next frame, someone else had joined Jesus' teaching, and I think it's, if I remember correctly, it said atheists on it. And the expression on the Jesus' teachings person's face was like, "Wait a minute, what?" And that's, I think that kind of hits at something that you're saying, like how backwards it is when it's not even the people who are claiming the label of Christian are aligning more so with the teachings of Jesus than the people who are using the name Christian in their description of themselves.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that happens. I don't know if it's the majority, but yeah.
Right. And that's why I said I don't even know if you would agree with the sentiment of it, but I mean, it unfortunately does seem to be the trend that I'm currently seeing, at least from my own perspective. It's,
Yeah.
from my own interpretation of the world around me. So, but to your point, that's kind of what you're talking about there. Like, what does that say about the future of the church in America?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, maybe we should try to find someone. Maybe we should try to find someone that knows more about this than we do. Reach out to them. Try to get them on.
That would be impossible because I know all things.
Well,
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
what happened to all that? We're not experts talk.
Strengthens. That was just fake humility.
Oh. You'll have that.
No, actually, I don't. I don't have fake humility.
I do sometimes.
I probably do. But I do recognize that I'm actually just not even really all that smart of a person. I don't know.
Right.
Like, I'm just trying my best.
Yeah, same. But yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, just based on some of the things I have heard, like I know that some of the folks in those spaces, the Christian national spaces, are pretty extreme. You know,
Right.
and I don't. I know that that's maybe not like the case for everyone who would consider themselves a Christian nationalist. Anyone who would actually adopt that label
Right.
for themselves, but
I mean, in trying to be open-minded about it, I'm sure that it's a term that's used a lot in a lot of ways, like deconstruction or universalist. Like those are all words and labels that everybody that uses them has their own conception of what it even means.
right,
And so some people may hear us use the terminology Christian nationalism and consider themselves that, and nothing that we have said so far align, and they think that we're just spouting crap
could be, yeah,
because it's not in alignment with what they consider to be Christian nationalism. And that's just that's the unfortunate thing about language, is that we have terms, especially when we're trying to label things and people, as we all have different understandings of what those things even mean. I mean, that's been one of our biggest complaints about people who have said crap about like universalists, is like they'll attack the what we mean, what we say when we say universalist, but then what they're attacking is a straw man that has nothing to do with the universe.
right,
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we mean something totally different than what you're attacking when you're saying that. Like your arguments aren't even related to what we're talking about, because it's a completely different thing.
right,
And we've seen the same thing with like deconstruction and Alyssa Childers and
right,
that crowd. When they say deconstruction, they mean something completely different than what we mean when we say deconstruction.
right.
And again, I think, just trying to be generous, I think that probably people do that with Christian nationalists too. The term Christian nationalism.
Yeah,
Because a lot of people probably are just like, well, I love my country, and I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian nationalist. Don't cut that out of context.
Oh, I'm clipping it.
But that is probably like, I mean, just to be real, that probably is like, some people are just like, well, yeah, I mean, of course, I love my country, I love my religion, I'm a Christian,
Right,
and I'm a patriot. Of course, I'm a Christian. Like.
right.
But
Yeah,
that's a fine position. That's not really
Right.
what we're talking
Yeah.
about here.
yeah. I'm not saying that you can't be a patriot. And like one thing I said earlier about the Jesus flag,
Yeah.
like I'm not saying that Jesus doesn't love the people in the military
Right.
and want their safety and care about them.
Right.
I'm not saying that Jesus doesn't. I'm not. I just think it's a weird look.
Yeah. I mean,
Right,
Jesus.
for someone who is pretty clearly nonviolent.
Right. Jesus blessed the centurion. The centurion's a Roman soldier.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, of course he does. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's right to use him as a mascot for militarism.
Right.
Beings that, his cornerstone teaching being the Beatitudes.
Right.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. Turning the other cheek, loving your enemy.
Right. The whole thing, like,
Blessed are the merciful.
again, to your point, like the whole his nonviolence seemed to kind of be his thing.
Yeah.
So, like, using him as a mascot or a symbol for militarism seems wrong to me. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't love the people of the military. Obviously, he does.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if there's anyone who's currently in the military or is a veteran, like, I'm not trying to offend anyone or anything.
No, I mean, I've got loved ones who've served in the military, friends who've served in the military, and I mean,
sure.
at one time I even looked into it.
Yeah.
I ended up not going that route, but looked into it, and it's an interesting conversation to have. It's just hard to have that conversation because people's emotions do get so charged into it.
Yeah.
About like the nonviolence aspect of it and Jesus, and because I know that the argument would be made of like, part of nonviolence is protecting those who can't protect themselves. You know what I mean? Like, so I know the arguments for it, and I acknowledge the intricacies,
There it is.
intricacies of it.
Yeah, I mean, like I know that one thing someone could say is like that, Jesus' teachings may work. Maybe they're meant for like individuals, but like doesn't work for countries.
Right.
And like, yeah. I mean, yeah, if you just take Jesus' teachings and you try to apply them to, that's why I think the whole trying to mix the two, the politics is just, it doesn't work, because like if you pay attention to everything Jesus says, America's dead in 10 years probably. if if we actually took everything Jesus said and applied it to our country and the way we run the country.
Right.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like they're not great policies for trying to maintain America as a superpower.
Right. I mean, well, we kind of talked about that a little bit with the whole idea of immigration, right? And that's like, I can understand the argument of like being a very strict on immigration policy as being what's best for America. I'm not saying it is, and I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not an immigration expert. I have no idea. But I can see the argument.
Right.
But what's best for those individuals?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if you're supposed to be, according to the teachings of Jesus and the scriptures, you're supposed to be loving your neighbors, which is not just your countrymen. J.D. Vance, just want to throw that out there. But if you're actually supposed to be like treating the foreigners with, as that's biblical language, by the way. I'm not trying to be offensive, but right. the foreign born, that's a kind of a key cornerstone of all the biblical teachings is the refugee, the immigrant, the foreign born are all supposed to be regarded with respect and love and compassion. Maybe what's best for America isn't actually like compatible with the teaching of Christ. If you're
right,
you know what I mean? Like to your point, like
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny that you went there with that, because that was going to be that's the first thing that popped into my mind was like, I hear the people say that of like, well, but they would use that as an argument of why we need to be militarily active in the world and have a very strong military, but then ignore that same point on other aspects of where they're trying to enforce their interpretations of Jesus's teachings into the government. You know what I mean? And so, like, I don't think you can pick and choose like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's I know we talk about Christian nationalism a lot, but it's a big thing right now. Like, it's kind of if you're in a United States of America in 2025 and you're in Christian spaces, this is an important thing to talk about. Like, it's in our face, in our earbuds every single day. So,
yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's about all I've got to say about
it. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, there's other stuff we could talk about. We could talk about the thing. Have we talked about the thing that J.D. Vance said that you brought up? Have we talked about that on the show yet?
I don't think so.
I mean, we could talk about that. We could talk about, Trump appointing, Paula White. We could talk about some of that stuff.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I mean, we definitely don't have to.
Right.
But we can.
The J.D. Vance one really, really kind of bothered me because it was...
I do wish that if I had known we were going to go into this much depth, I probably would have done more research before we recorded.
Especially because I don't want to speak out of context of what he said, but like something... It essentially, like, it was something about the, like, what it means, like a Christian conception of love would be to, like, love your family and then your community and then your country and then with whatever love is left over, as if love is some sort of finite resource. Right. You love everybody else. Yeah. And it's like, no, that's from my conception, that's literally the opposite.
Right, yeah.
You're supposed to extend your love outwards and work your way in.
Yeah.
Not start inwards and work your way out.
Right.
And the weird thing about it was that, at least from my understanding, which who knows what's real and what's propaganda, but that there
Right.
was actually like he was, I don't know,
That's the
remember,
whole thing.
it may have been the Pope or it was like some really high ranking official actually wrote a letter like addressing that and was like, no, basically saying what I was saying, like, no, it's completely opposite. That's incorrect. And
Yeah.
then, but what was blowing me away by that, because of course I saw this on social media, was like all the comments about people who were just siding with JD Vance. It was like, F the Pope. And I was like, okay, I didn't expect that. Like,
Yeah, even a lot of Catholics came out against the Pope on that.
I know, which is just goes to what we were saying at the very beginning of like, and that's not just like, I don't want to compare the Pope to Christ either. Obviously, I'm not a Catholic even, so I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the Pope seems like a rad dude and all, but he's not. He has no authority over my life. But just the fact that even people who are within the Catholic Church, who like the Pope is supposed to be the number one person they look up to after Jesus, really, and then they're just, but because he said something that disagreed with a politician, even though what the politician was talking about was religion, and the Pope is supposed to be the religious figurehead,
Right.
the highest religious authority that they have in their organization. They still turn their back on him because he disagreed with what the politician said. How does that not tell you that we're putting politicians above religion? Like, it's
Yeah. So, like I said, I wish I'd done more research. Had I known we were going to bring this up, I would have gotten the exact quote of what he said.
Yeah.
But I know that he tried to he explained. I know he went on further at late after he got some pushback. I know he came back and kind of tried to explain what he was talking about, and he was talking about a teaching that is it's basically I can't remember the Latin word for it, but it is the order of loves is what it is. And from what I understand, what he said was actually not quite what Augustine said, which is like if you can, I think it was Augustine and Aquinas, and Thomas Aquinas
Yep.
and Saint Augustine that both of them had said similar things to what he was trying to say about like having there being a certain order to your loves or whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean even if he nailed it, and that's exactly which from listening to people that are way smarter than me on it have basically said that that's not at all what Aquinas or Augustine were saying.
Right.
But even if he nailed it, doesn't mean they're right.
Right.
You know, like I mean, I'll take the words of Jesus over Augustine or Aquinas any day.
Right.
You know, and so yeah, I don't know. That one was weird to me.
It was just it's the point to me wasn't even like it bothered me because his conception of Jesus's teachings on love was completely backwards, which is offensive to me, really, in a way. But it's a false teaching, in my opinion, which of the highest degree, by the way, because we're talking about love, which is God is love.
Right.
The two commandments that Jesus gave was love God and love neighbor. Like
Right.
that's it. That's the law fulfilled.
Love each
neighbor.
other as I've loved you.
Yes. So if we get that mixed up, then we have nothing.
Right.
So to me, it is of utmost importance.
Yeah.
But that wasn't even the point of, to me, what was even more egregious was, I don't know about egregious, but what was even more concerning to me was the way that people just wholeheartedly supported him. Even, to your point, even Catholics refuting the Pope in favor of him. To me, that was just like the most concerning, the most alarming thing, the thing that set off all of the alarm bells of like, how do we not see this? How do we not see what road we're going down here? Whenever
Right.
like we are just so wholeheartedly behind our politicians. How do we not see that? That to me, that was the point that stood out to me that I want to address. Of like we've got to be able to see that.
Yeah.
Because then, if in that case, like there's no, but and I've kind of hinted at this before with even some people. People frustrate me quite a bit, you know, because I've heard a lot of people say, that they don't do that with Trump, and that if they didn't vote for him because they loved him, but they voted for him because they thought he was the better of the two options, and blah 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 blah. But then this is what always happens. Like, there is no condemnation. There's no talking out about it. Even with something so seemingly so egregious, it's like we're going to wholeheartedly support him no matter what. And anytime you speak out against something he says, or we're talking about J.D. Vance here, who's Trump's vice president, like, even if you do come out and say something, you'll get attacked, and there are people act like you hate. I don't hate Trump as a person or JD Vance. I don't know JD Vance. I don't personally know Trump. My understanding of Trump as a person is I don't think he's a very Christ-like person. But at the same time, like, I don't know him. I don't know the intents of his hearts, and like, I really try not to judge people. Even him, even though it's hard, and I don't always succeed at it. I do judge people. I'm not immune to it. So I don't hate him. But I think you've got to be able to criticize people. You've got, and not when I say criticize people, I don't just mean like beat them down, but I'm talking about like when they say something, you've got to hold them accountable to it. You've got to be able to do that without people like you. He's untouchable. You can't say anything negative about him, or we're going to come at you. It's like, no, man. Like, I think especially people in power. Nobody should be criticized more harshly, in my opinion, than like the president, the government people, like the president, the senators, the vice president. And even I think the same goes within like religions. The people that hold the most authority should be held to a higher standard of accountability.
Right. Yeah.
But it's the very exact opposite. We are so team oriented that like you can't speak out against people. Especially, like, it's nobody bats an eye if you're going to speak out against a nobody, but like, don't speak out against the politician that represents my side of this team,
Right.
or don't speak out against this denomination because this is the denomination I belong to. So don't speak out. You can't. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
no, those are the people that we need to be holding those people to account, and that doesn't mean that we hate them.
Right.
And it doesn't even mean that you can disagree with somebody and hold them to accountability and still support them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just because they're not perfect, nobody's perfect. They're going to screw up sometimes. And when they do, you need to be like, hey, I think you screwed up there. Now, I still love you, and I think that 99 of these other times, and you did 100 things, and 99 of them were right. But you did this one wrong thing, and you need to be held accountable for that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It seems like we've lost that ability in today's culture.
Perhaps.
Maybe I'm just crazy, but that's what it seems like to me. Well, I'm definitely crazy. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, it's just an interesting thing because I know that, like, I've talked to some people personally that feel that same way about like they feel like if they say anything, they get labeled as bigots or homophobes or xenophobic or whatever, if for making any sort of comments that are more right leaning or conservative, so
If the shoe fits. I'm kidding.
I mean, I'm just saying that,
I
I know that, like, someone could say the same thing on either side.
Yes.
People have that same complaint
Well, and
on either side.
and that's why I phrased it the way that I did, is because I didn't say that I think that only the people on the right have this problem, or only
Right.
conservatives do this. No, I think it's the society as a whole, and it's not just politics, it's religion, or it's literally anything. We've lost the ability to criticize our own team.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to over account for the other team.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if I've used this. Have I used this analogy on the show before? I don't know if I have or not, but I guess I'm going to use it again because I don't remember. But I was talking to someone, and I basically said that same thing, like not being able to see the problems with your own side, and like only seeing the extreme parts of the other, and like I used an analogy of like Kool-Aid, and like one side's drinking blue Kool-Aid, the other side's drinking red Kool-Aid. Both of you got mustaches. One of you's got a red mustache walking around looking silly. One of you's got a blue mustache walking around looking silly, making fun of each other for having silly mustaches on and not looking in the mirror to recognize that you have one also.
Right.
Like, look at these fools walking around with their blue mustaches on or their red mustaches on. Meanwhile, you got one too. You just can't see it.
Right.
Like, it's everybody's drinking Kool-Aid. Everybody got a mustache. Everyone walking around looking silly. Look in the mirror. You know?
Yeah.
That's applicable to everybody.
I think so. But yeah, I think it is. It's we've lost that ability to I don't know why that is though. Or did we lose it or did we ever have it?
I don't know, man. I don't know anymore.
But I know even just like in a personal, like an applicable level, like I've had this come up several different times before where like I would post something on Facebook about my disagreement with Trump or on a particular topic or whatever. And then inevitably there will be a comment that even though the name Biden was never mentioned in my post, or it will inevitably come up of like, well, this and this about Biden. I'm like, well, I didn't say anything about Biden. Like, I didn't support Biden. I didn't vote for him. Like,
Yeah.
or well, that was one of the silliest things. Is like he wasn't even on the ticket this time. It was Harris. But no, I didn't vote for Harris either. Like,
Yeah.
you just assume because I've criticized Trump that I must wholeheartedly support Harris. I'm like, I didn't vote for her either. Like, I didn't vote for Trump. I can dang sure tell you that. But I didn't vote for Harris either. Like,
Right.
it's not a. But for whatever reason, that's what we do. It's like it's our team or the other team, and like you criticized our team, but that means you play for the other team.
Yeah.
No, I got shade for everybody. These hands do not discriminate.
Yeah.
Everybody could catch these hands.
Everybody. Everybody.
I'm equal opportunist.
Yeah.
But yeah, we definitely went way more on the Christian nationalism side than I thought we would.
Yeah.
It's not actually been something I've thought a lot about lately, to be honest.
So it's something I've thought about a little bit, but like it's also something that I have more and more recently recognized my ignorance on it, and so I hesitate to say much just because like I feel like I need to educate myself more on it before we talk a lot about it. And I say that after we've basically spent an entire hour at least.
Well, I think it just
Talking
depends on.
about
I think it just depends on how, again. I've said it before already in this episode, but I think it depends on how we're talking about it. Because like I'm giving you my opinions and my observations.
Yeah.
Now I've admitted that I'm not a scholar on the topic, and to your point, there's people out there who know a heck of a lot more, and there's more that we could do to educate ourselves on the topic. But I'm giving you my perspective as it is today. This is the way I see it. Like,
Yeah.
could be wrong. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm a moron. I don't know. But again, if you're coming to me to teach you something, well, that also says something about your intelligence. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It hasn't been. It's not something that I've thought too much recently about. I think I have to. This is one of those topics where I have to take a break from, because I get
You'll go crazy.
well, not just crazy, but like I can very easily go down into a pit of despair.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like right now,
Right.
is spiritually like I feel like I'm in a good place. As far as like there's still stuff I'm wrestling with. We talked a little bit about it last night, but it's not. I'm not wrestling with it in a way of like I'm on the brink of collapse. My faith is about. You know what I mean? Like I'm in a good place overall. And I say, like, I'm in a good place just in general. Like, the last 2 weeks I've participated in Bible study for the first time in a year. Like
Yeah.
I'm in a good space in regards to that as well. Of like and I've been, studying more and from a good place, not just reading to read, but like you have to. There really is something to like preparing your heart and mind to receive whatever it is that you're about to read, and
Right.
I've been lately, before this most recent season that I've entered, I've still been reading and studying, but I don't know that my heart and my mind was in the place to actually receive what I needed to receive from it. But that's
Yeah.
changed lately, and like I've been more receptive, and I feel like I've gotten a lot more from my studies and my reading of scriptures and the Bible studies, and even coming to church and listening to the sermons, because it's something that we've talked about before, about how sometimes you get bogged down in what you disagree with, or that what you don't like, that you miss out on actually the good stuff that was there for you to glean from.
Right.
And I'm really bad about that, and I noticed that, and so like I've tried to be mindful of that, and so like I try not to let, like, when I hear something that I don't like or I don't agree with, or that to not just shut down.
Gives you the ick.
Yeah, but to just acknowledge it, like, yeah, I think that's wrong and I don't agree with that, but like there's still something here for me to get, like, I've left every time from listening to a sermon, or whether it's watching a lecture on YouTube or listening to a podcast, like from feeling edified, I guess, or in a good, so overall I'm in a good spot. And so if I go down this road of despair with Christian nationalism, it's gonna put me, we've talked about it some before, like it gets to a point with me where it's really, because it feels so, and this is, again, I've said it a million times in this episode, it's just my own personal opinions, but and my own personal interpretations, but sometimes it's so anti to the Christianity that I believe in that it almost feels like a completely separate religion. And then I start to go down the despair of like, what am I even doing here? Like, why am I even a part of this anymore? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so if I get too far into that pit, it might set me back another 6 months. You know what I mean? Like, I don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think it's important to talk about and to stay aware of, but I can't dwell on it right now. Like,
Right. Well, so what have you been thinking about? So you hadn't really been thinking about Christian nationalism. Anything in particular?
not too much. I mean, it's been kind of a weird time for me, as far as I say that after I just talked about how good my time has been, but there, it's not like one specific topic has been like dwelling on my mind. There's been a lot of different things. It just depends on what we're reading or what we're studying. Like this past week we did John 15. And the one thing that was asked in the Bible study with the section of John 15 where it gets to the whole the world, Jesus is talking to his disciples and telling them that basically the world's going to hate you because it hated me, and if it hates me, it's going to hate you. And the question was posed, well, then, like, what's meant by that? Who is the world? And it was phrased. The question was phrased from the perspective of like, yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot as far as like people. I don't catch a lot of shade. I don't catch a lot of heat from people. You know what I mean? Like So what does that mean? But the question was asked, who's the world? And so I really spent like 3 solid days thinking about that, or at least 2 solid days thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I feel like we miss a lot, and our missing of it, I think, has bad implications. Because what I mean by missing is, I think a lot of times we tend to view, what you'll hear is that anybody that's non-Christian is the world, and that Christians aren't the world, they're Christians. It's like a us versus, it separates the whole world into an us versus them. It's the Christians versus the non-Christians. And like, everybody that's non-Christian is going to hate you because you're a Christian. And that, I don't think that's what that's saying at all. Like, if you look in the context of what Jesus is talking about in John 15, the people that hated Jesus, we already talked about who got him killed. It was the religious authorities. It was the religious people.
Yeah.
So it's like, he's saying the religious people hated me. Well, then if he's saying that if they hated him, they're going to hate you, well, then who's going to hate you? And I'm not saying that, even in saying that, people hear me say that. I know a lot of times they're like, oh, you're saying that the Christians are going to hate Jesus? No, that's not what I'm saying either. But I am saying that we can't. What I'm trying to say is that we can all be the world at certain times, whether you're Christian or non-Christian, because sometimes when you stand up for the teachings of Jesus, sometimes non-Christians do hate what you have to say. But sometimes those attacks come from within our own house. Sometimes when you stand up for what you perceive to be the teachings of Jesus and proclaim to be the teachings of Jesus, you will get shade from Christians.
Yeah.
They hate what you have to say. This
Right.
is coming as somebody who's hopeful, not even more, I would say more than hopeful, a confident ultimate reconciliationist. I believe that all things are going to be made right. I completely don't believe that anybody's going to suffer in hell for all of eternity. I've caught more hate and shade on that topic from Christians than non-Christians.
Yeah.
And I believe that because of Jesus and and what he taught and what he showed us about who the Father was.
Right.
Because when I believe that when we look at Jesus, we see the Father.
Yeah.
And I don't see anything in Jesus and his teachings of loving your enemies and forgiveness that would torture somebody for all of eternity.
Right.
So because of that, but again, you'll get more shade on that topic from within the Christian house than without. So sometimes I don't think it's us versus them. I think we all embody the world at some point.
Yeah.
Jesus, said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." This is Peter, his right-hand man, the rock upon who the church is going to be built. He called him Satan in that moment because in that moment he wasn't living his true identity. He wasn't living as the rock. In that moment, he was living as the world.
He said, "You have your mind set on the concerns of man,
Yes.
not of God." That's what he says to Peter after he says that.
So even Peter's susceptible to it. He wouldn't tell us to be cautious of the schemes of the devil if we weren't susceptible to falling prey to them. Sometimes as Christians, we are the world too.
Right. Yeah, so like whenever we were talking about that in Bible study, my mind was going to like John 12, where Jesus says, "Now is the judgment of this world,
Right.
and now is the ruler of this world cast out, and I, if I'm lifted up, will draw all people to myself." He's talking about going to the cross there, which, I mean, little side note, if we're talking about ultimate reconciliation, he literally just said he would draw all people to himself. But
Right.
but right before that, he says, "Now is the judgment of this world, and that the ruler of this world is cast out." So, like, I do think that there is, and there's other passages where the prince of the power of the air, right? Like there's like, the idea that like the world is captive to some force that doesn't want our good,
Right.
like that is part of this also, and that's, and that works itself out in the ways that you're talking about, though. It works
Right.
itself out in us in those ways where we oppose Christ.
Exactly. Right. And I also think about it from the perspective of not just individual beings, but literally the world as a whole. Like, as in, Jesus and the kingdom is upside down to the way of the world.
Right.
The way of the world tells us retribution is the way to go. It tells us an eye for an eye is the way to go. It tells us that we've tried turning the other cheek, and that just doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the way of the world.
Yeah.
And it hates the idea of turning the other cheek. It hates the idea of loving your enemies.
Right.
It hates the idea that instead of seeking retribution, we're going to seek reconciliation. Instead of swinging back, I'm going to turn the other cheek. The world hates that. And again, when I say the world, I don't mean individual people. I'm talking about the world itself as a whole, the order of things.
Yeah. Right. Because the world has fallen. That's just basic Christian belief that the world has fallen. Like, that's why the world is opposed to the way of Christ, because it's fallen.
Yeah, it's upside down. It's up. That's why I've started referring to. I now refer to the kingdom of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven as the upside down, like on Stranger Things. Yeah, it's the upside down.
Yeah.
But the only difference being in Stranger Things, the upside down is a pretty scary place.
Right.
And in this, it's the complete opposite, where the world is the scary place.
Right.
The upside down is the good place.
The kingdom of God might be a scary place depending on who you are.
Could be, yeah.
If you're in love with the world and the power and the worldly systems, you know.
I mean, that could be that talk of both heaven and hell being God's love.
Yeah.
It's not. There's no difference in the substance, which I know that's a weird word to use there, but that's just it's a language thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure it's not a substance in the way that we imagine substance, but
Right.
there's no change or difference in the substance of heaven and hell. It's the same thing. It's God's love,
Wrongly received.
or rightly received. Yes,
Yeah.
like it just depends on how you receive it or what. I mean, again, perhaps it has to be dependent on how much you've allowed the refiner's fire to refine you here and now, or how much wood, hay, and stubble there still is that needs to be burned away.
Right.
Because if you're 99.9% wood, hay, and stubble, it sounds like that doesn't sound like it's gonna be a pleasant experience.
Right. But you'll be saved.
But there's still that 0.1%. And even if you're not, we believe in a God of resurrection.
Right. Well, I mean, and but ain't that exactly what Paul says though? In that passage, he says, where is that? 1 Corinthians 3? Wood, hay, and stubble?
I can't remember.
I believe it's 1 Corinthians 3. He says, you know what? Let me just read it.
Do it to it.
Let me pull this up right quickly. Because, I mean, he says that even if everything is burned up, you'll be saved, but only as one saved through fire.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I'm not even going to read it. That's what it says.
That's what it says. You don't need to read it. Trust the Holy Spirit to speak through you.
Holy Ghost.
Right.
Yeah. So, like, yeah.
You know, never mind.
But, I mean, having having everything burnt up sounds like something you want to avoid.
Right.
Let's get that process going now.
Seems like.
Jesus said everyone is salted with fire.
Right.
But salt is good.
I tend to not like salt that much, to be honest.
Jesus says otherwise.
But it does preserve things. So
Your mind is set on the concerns of man and not of God right now. Get behind me, Satan.
I'm serving mammon. My mind is set on mammon.
My word.
Yeah, I had the thought just suddenly popped into my head that would have been so much more applicable at the very beginning of the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Because when we were talking about the afterlife and stuff. Because I'd recently had a thought one morning when I was running on the treadmill of like, I'd heard somebody talking about something similar, and then it sparked I was like, oh my God, I never realized this before. But like concerning like what the afterlife looks like or what kind of experience that would be.
Yeah.
There was one perfect example that could have been used or given, and it said nothing. And that was the story of the resurrection of Lazarus. We had somebody who was dead for 3 days.
Yeah.
That was the perfect opportunity to ask, hey, man, what was that like?
Yeah.
Nothing. There's not a peep. You couldn't give us anything, man? Come on.
Yeah, Lazarus says nothing actually in that whole like Lazarus never speaks.
No, not a word.
That's an interesting detail, I think.
But there was that you couldn't give us something, just anything.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah. Maybe he told some folks.
Yeah, I mean the point being that we don't have it. Like they didn't. The writer of that, I think it's John. Is it John where Lazarus is at? The story of Lazarus. I think it's John.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he had the opportunity there to write it in there and didn't.
Yeah.
So you know what? No thanks to you for that, pal. You gave us a lot of good stuff, but you dropped the ball on that one, buddy.
I guess it wasn't that important.
Not to him. But that in of itself could be profound. It wasn't that important to him.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. It's just an interesting thought. It's an interesting thought that we didn't get anything there. So, but that was way more applicable to the beginning of this episode than the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, let's see. I'm still knee deep in incarnation. I've been trying to write the paper. I've watched all the lectures, which I'm super grateful for. Actually, I've watched them all twice because I wanted to make like I'm really taking my time. I'm taking this seriously, dude. I'm not just trying to like I'm not trying to rush through just to get a degree because what's the point in that? Like I don't
Right.
even I'm not even trying to use my degree necessarily. I mean, I'm open to using it if the opportunity arises for me to, but the whole reason that I'm going to Global Grace Seminary and getting a degree is just because I wanted to deepen my own learning and my own understanding.
Right.
So I don't care if how long it takes me. I'm not trying to just breeze through this. I want to know and understand what it is that I'm learning. So I've watched every one of the lectures twice. I've read every one of the books. I've read on the incarnation 2+ times. Like I'm trying to soak up the information, so it's taken me a long time. But and I'm not just trying to write an essay just to pass, but I'm trying to write a good paper
Right.
because number one, it helps me to put everything. It's one of those things where when you're writing, you're able to kind of put your thoughts down on paper and it helps you to organize your thoughts a little bit better and flow. Like that's one of the things that I've used writing this essay for is like it's helped me to put the flow of thought of the incarnation together into like a good cohesive flow.
Right.
So, but I'm a little under 3,000 words into that so far. So I'm still working on it. I probably should work on it more than I do. I usually only get about 1 day a week to work on it, so that's part of why it's taking me so long too. But and then the problem with that is every time I'll work on it like once a week, and then that 1 day a week, it's been a week since I looked at it, so I'll have to read it over again. Well, then once I start reading it, I decide I want to change this, change that, and then I spend the whole time instead of writing more, I've just changed what I already wrote. So
Right.
I'm not really progressing towards the end. I'm just,
Yeah.
but I'm still, of course, the whole idea of the incarnation is just, it's such a big thing.
Yeah.
So there's one thing that I think that I hate to even say that actually, because that's probably ignorant of me to say. Because when I say we, I really only mean me, I guess. Well, not just me, but me and my own small niche and experience within Christianity, Well, what I was going to say was that we tend to, I think, lose sight of just how, because we think that doctrine is just set in stone doctrine and it's been that way from the beginning, or that sort of seems to be the thought that we have about these things. We lose sight of the fact that, man, all the doctrines that we have today are things that have been wrestled with
Right.
for thousands of years.
Argued about.
These are things that have been argued about. There's been various schools of thought. There's been and that's one of the things I love about T.F. Torrance's Incarnation book is that because he's a professor, or was, he's passed now, but he was a professor, and the book is literally just his lecture notes that's been compiled into a cohesive book. So he's not just telling you what he thinks, he's telling you the history behind it and how he's showing how the doctrine of the incarnation has evolved over time. And maybe that's not even the good way to say it, how man's understanding of the incarnation has evolved over time, and talks about the various different schools of thought within it, and talks about some of the different creeds in the councils where they wrote the creeds, and the reason sets the history around that, about like why certain things had to be addressed in those councils and creeds, you know what I mean? Because it's just understanding that history is something that I've gained an insight in, and it makes me feel, I don't know what's the right word for it. Encouraged, it seems like a weird thing to say there, but it is a little bit encouraging to know that, like, if you don't get it, man, yeah, you've got 2,000 years of people wrestling with it because they didn't get it either. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just it's not like we've had one cohesive doctrine that Jesus handed his disciples and it's been unchanged throughout the last 2,000 plus years. Like, no, that's not the way it works at all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Everything has been tested, tried, argued over, Some things have been set aside. Some things have been set aside for a time and brought back up. Some things were deemed, you know, we talked about a little bit with Maximus, how he got his tongue
Yeah.
and hand cut out
Yeah.
for about for teaching that Jesus had two wills, and then like a couple hundred years later, they're like, you know what? The councils were like, you know what? I think maybe he's right about that.
Yeah.
And it's like these things get it. All this stuff develops over time.
Yeah, and he also goes into how like the Reformation, notice what the Reformation really came forth out of is a noticing that there was a lack in some of our thinking, like we needed to reverse course and go back and start over again on certain things. And like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, but the reason why I caught myself in saying that was probably ignorant to say that we tend to think that is because I think that's my experience because I have a very limited. There are strands of Christianity that are very familiar with their church traditions,
Right. Yeah.
whereas we, I come out of a Southern Baptist tradition for the first 18 years of my life, and now I'm non-denominational. So we don't. That's one I like. Non-denominational is fine, but that's one thing I feel like we lack is that cohesive tradition. And I don't even mean tradition as far as like sacraments or whatever. I'm talking about just tradition as far as the history of doctrine and how it's how the doctrine of the church has evolved over time. Like we don't know any of that. Everything that I've ever learned about patristics and the history of the church, I've had to learn on my own. That was 0% of that has ever been learned in any of the churches I've ever attended.
Right.
So,
yeah.
that's why I said that way that I did is because my experience is that, but I'm sure that there are denominations or churches out there who take that stuff very seriously and teach that. I just haven't. That's not been my experience.
Yeah. That is something that would benefit so many churches.
Yeah, it's been huge for me for sure.
Yeah, to just learn some of the history of that stuff.
Even from a perspective of that doesn't even mean you have to hold to what those people thought, but it just helps you to understand how we got to where we're at now.
Right.
When you can see the evolution of things over time and the evolution of man's understanding and man's thoughts, then, it helps put pieces together. Sometimes it's hard to see. If you can only see the end goal or the end result, you can only see where we're at now, but you don't know how we got here. It's hard to even understand what are we even talking about here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, unless you're just making up nonsense, probably whatever you're thinking has already been thought about and either called a heresy or agreed with or went back and forth between the two. Like, it's like, yeah, unless you're just making up nonsense, that's why I said this, I think before, whenever it's almost like we can't even talk about Jesus' humanity and his divinity without, at some point or another, you're probably going to say some sort of ancient heresy.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the Trinity. Like, anytime you start talking about the Trinity, at some point or another, you're probably going to end up saying something that's a heresy.
Right.
In the history of church. Like, there's just, these things are hard to talk about well. And
I mean, I've been recorded on camera saying heresies, so.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure I have too. I'm sure I have said things that at one point or another was considered heresy. I mean, depending on who you are, some people think Universalism is, but I don't think it was ever condemned personally. It's not like Universalism as such, but like I think a misunderstanding of Origen's teachings were condemned at a council, perhaps. All that stuff with the councils gets really tricky, but also Protestant kind of don't care.
Right. Well, that's the thing that's what I meant in saying that even learning the history of them, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but it still helps to understand to see the whole picture. You know what I mean? Like,
and I don't want to say I don't care. I actually do care about that kind of stuff. Like, the whole the thing about like church history and like looking at those things that were considered to be errors, and which is all a heresy is, just an error. Like things that were considered to be errors and things that people were pushing back against, and like all that stuff really interests me a lot.
Yeah.
So like I do care about it. Like I don't want to say like I don't care at all about what those ancient councils and stuff like that had to say.
Right. Right.
You know.
Yeah. One of the big things about the study of the incarnation that's really stood out to me is that I didn't get before this course was how you can't separate the incarnation and the atonement. And like I spent a
Yeah.
lot of time writing about that in my essay, and I didn't see it until Father John Bear kind of brought that to light. As far as in Athanasius's famous work on the incarnation is actually a 2-part work, and that when you like take it in, it's part 2, and when you take it in conjunction with both parts, it's easy to see that what he's actually addressing is the atonement, not the
Right.
incarnation.
Yeah.
The incarnation, though, it can't be separated from the atonement. And T.F. Torrance writes about that in his book Incarnation as well, about how like you can't separate the two things, and so
Yeah.
that has helped shed some light on the incarnation for me and the atonement, really. But
And creation.
yes.
Like I don't think you can separate incarnation from creation.
Well, that's the thing about theology as a whole, especially, is like I actually don't think you can separate it. We tend to do it because it's hard for us to think in a continuous stream of thought, so it's easier for us to chop things into pieces and compartmentalize them. But really, you can't take any of it apart as separate. Like it all has to fit together.
Yeah.
That's actually a lot of what has caused deconstruction for me in the past. Is that like once I started to not compartmentalize and segregate and try to put the pieces together, I realized the pieces didn't fit, and that was, you know what I mean? So that's what led me down the path I'm on now, currently. So
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many things that could be said about that. All those connections, Like, I mean, the atonement, what we're talking about, we're talking about what happens at the cross. And what happens at the cross, Jesus says it's finished. He, like, this is one thing that I know I sent you in a text, but, like, in Genesis, whenever it says God created man, when it talks about God creating man, like, and then you read John's gospel and Pilate says, "Behold the man."
right,
Like, in other words, this is the man. This is what the pinnacle. This is the the purpose of everything. This is the man in its full creation. The I don't even know how to say what I'm trying to say. Like the fullness of creation. This is
the perfection
right.
of creation,
The completion of creation.
completion. There you go.
And the telos, right? And this is Jesus is behold the man, so says Pilate. That's him. And this is when he's going to the cross and he says it is finished, and in other words, creation is finished. And the New Testament authors, they say, if anyone's in Christ, he's a new creation. Like you can't separate creation from the atonement or from incarnation.
Right. What the way Torrance words it is he says that they're both points on one line, basically. You've just at opposite ends of the same timeline. You've got the incarnation and the atonement, but they're between the two. They're connected. You know what I mean? That way you can't separate the two. But that's sort of the visual aid that he uses is envisioning like 2 points on the same line. 2 bookends, I guess you could say.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know how I feel about that.
Well,
take it up with him.
Yeah, take it up with Torrance. I guess. I'm just telling you what he said.
Yeah. I haven't even read it, so
Right.
Who knows?
You're getting it from me, and I'm probably not even saying it right. So.
Yeah. I probably should just join you, huh?
Yeah, I tried to tell you that right from the very beginning.
I know. It's a lot more expensive now.
I know. Look what you did.
It's like double the price. The
Look
tuition.
what you did, you jerk.
The tuition is double the price now for Global Grace.
It really has been a huge... Man, I love it. I'm so thankful for it. It's been... It's... In the end, again, I don't even know what's the goal with it other than just to learn for myself.
Yeah.
It's been so good it's been a good thing for me. So I'm glad. I'm glad I did. It was a good investment.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe not financially,
Yeah.
but
You're probably not making that back.
but spiritually,
yeah.
it was invaluable. So
Right. Well. You know what? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much longer we want to go.
it's up to me. It's up to you, man.
I was gonna maybe bring up some things that I had been thinking about,
Yeah, let's do it.
but I don't know.
You know what we need to do?
Been going almost 2 hours now.
We need a switch down here we can flip and tell our assistants upstairs to bring us something to drink.
He could use some water, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
No, what have you been thinking about? Let's do it.
I don't even know.
Just say it.
So I've been thinking about I've been thinking about a lot of different stuff, but like one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is like some of the things that Jesus says. Like I've been kind of just like wondering if like, man, Jesus just says some weird stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean like
It's funny to say it that way, but yeah.
but like I don't even mean like things that are like you know what he's saying but you don't want to do it because it's hard. I don't mean that.
Right.
I mean like what are you actually saying and like what does this mean? Because I don't know what it means, but if it means what maybe I think it means, then it has like crazy implications that I don't know what to do with. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, maybe an example that comes to my mind, I don't know if this is actually what you would consider an example, but I would lump it into this, is like where he says, like, if you don't hate your brother or your sister, your mother, or your father, then you're not worthy of me, right? Like that's potentially one of those.
Yeah, that's a weird saying, right?
Yeah.
That's a thing that's kind of weird and seems out of character.
Like not exactly sure what that means or how to use it or
Yeah, but there was one that came up recently in our Bible study. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Where he said something that was...
I've literally only been the last 2 weeks. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it was in the very last one we had where you were there. We did the Zoom call.
Yeah.
I didn't bring it up. Remember, I think I texted you about it, but I didn't actually bring it up in the call.
I don't remember.
And I don't remember exactly what he said either, but I remember just thinking, like, you know what? Maybe I'll just look it up.
It's John 15.
Yeah. I'll just look it up and see what he says. But, like, I've just kind of been thinking about, but all of that got me to think more about, like, kind of revisiting something that I'd thought about before, which is, like, you know, we talk about Jesus. Well, you have to get in touch with who Jesus is, what he said, what he did, and all this. And like I've said that I don't know how many times on this podcast.
Right.
But then like there's certain things that like Jesus says and that Jesus does that like I don't know what to do with.
Right.
You know what I mean? So then it's kind of like I don't know. Am I even like saying anything that's worth saying there? When I say that, like, do I even follow that myself? I guess I don't know how to explain that, but there was something that, see if I can find it. So what I was talking about is from John 15. I'll start in verse 22. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not have sin. But now they have seen and hated both me and my Father.
Yeah. Which sort of goes in line with the writing in James, right? To them who know right and does it not, to them it is sin, or something like that. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but
Right.
it's sort of the same sort of idea of like, well, then is it better just to be ignorant?
Right. Yeah, like it is a weird thing to think about, like, because I mean, if you just take what Jesus said there at face value, people wouldn't be held accountable for anything. They wouldn't be held accountable for their sin
Right.
if he hadn't come and said the things he did and said and did the things he did. People wouldn't be held accountable for their sin. But
Right.
since he did,
Right.
they are. And it's like, I mean, if you just, I mean, and I understand this is just like one section. I mean, you have to take the whole context of the whole scripture.
Right.
But like, if you just take that phrase there and you think about the implications of that, it's kind of like, well, maybe you shouldn't have come, Jesus.
Right.
Like, would we have been better off? Would we not have been held accountable for our sin if you hadn't come? You know, it's a, and I know that maybe that seems like a silly example, but that's just like an example of like just like strange things that are said that, like, you know, if you think about them, it's kind of hard to understand what he's saying there.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. It's just like, and then
But
there's
don't you know that the Bible clearly says?
yeah, but then I was thinking about that scripture, and I was thinking about how it's just kind of weird, and then that scripture also made me think about things like, you know, um, parts of the Jesus's teaching where he doesn't sound very Jesus-y,
Right.
which is a weird way to put that, right?
Right.
But you know what I mean. Like, there's certain times whenever Jesus, and a lot of it's in the parables, and that's important because the parables aren't meant to be taken literally.
Right.
You know, there's stories, but like a lot of the stuff, there's some things that Jesus says that seem out of character for him.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and so that's an interesting thing to think about, and it's kind of like, you know, I don't know. It's just one of those things where, like, I guess I've just kind of been wondering to myself, do I have a misconception of who Jesus is?
Right. I mean, that's a valid question, a valid thing to wrestle with. There's a lot of things wrapped into that, actually, because it comes back to like how you read the Bible or what it is. You know what I mean? Like that, some of that can be wrapped into that same conversation.
Can you even actually know who Jesus is in his fullness? I don't know if you can even. Maybe that's the point.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm immediately thinking back to, I think it's in Ephesians, right? Paul saying that, like, he prays that we would all come to the full knowledge and understanding of this incomprehensible thing that is Christ within. Like,
The love of Christ.
yeah, it's like I don't know, from that perspective, it's a good point. Maybe it's something that we're always continually learning,
Yeah.
growing in. Because that was my thought when you first phrased the question, but you weren't fully phrasing it, and I wasn't sure what you were asking yet. But because I
wasn't sure what I was going to say either.
because my thought was like, I think that I think it would be a flawed understanding to think that you perfectly know everything about Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, as far as like you're in perfect alignment with him,
Right.
on every topic.
Yeah.
But I'd also don't. I think it's selling yourself short to say, do you know him at all?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That was an exaggeration.
I know.
But yeah.
But because from that perspective, like, I think it does show an ability to like have, but also grow.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and something that I really think is like, you know, I heard someone. It was Baxter, is who it was. I heard Baxter say something recently, like where he was talking about
My main man, Baxter.
he was talking about like coming across things in scripture and not really knowing what to do with them, or like not understanding, and he was like, ask Jesus. And it's such a simple thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's really kind of almost like a childish, like it's such as a
I watched that same one.
it's so like it's something that sounds so basic that you don't even think about it. You know,
Yeah.
like my first inclination is to like, oh, well, let's look at the Greek. Well, let's read some commentary. Let's, you know, my first thought isn't like, pray about it. I like ask Jesus, like, hey, Jesus, like, what did you mean here? Like, help me understand this. Holy Spirit, lead me into the truth of this. Like, I'm not
Right.
that. I don't know why that's not my first response. It should be.
Yeah, I don't even, my first initial reaction, and I don't know that this is correct or even fair, but I think part of that has to be our experience and the traditions that we've been raised a part of. I mean, we're hardcore Bible people, like as far as
Yeah.
the tradition that we've been brought up in, and so which is kind of even weird to say now that I'm talking it out, because in our worship is so spirit led, like, or
Right.
like it's almost exclusively like let the spirit flow and do whatever it wants to do, even if it makes you look silly. It's doing it.
Right. Yeah.
But when it comes to like biblical studies, that seems to be the back burner. It's all about what you were just talking about. Like let's read the word. Let's get into
Right.
it. What does the Greek say? What does the Hebrew say? You know what I mean? Like it's all about that kind of stuff, but the spirit is almost completely left out of it.
Right.
And again, I don't know that that's even fair. I don't know that that's even fair to say, but that's the way maybe that I had conceptualized it.
Right. At least as far as I know that there folks do pray
Yeah.
to be led by the Spirit as they read the scriptures, and I pray that too. Like before I go to the scriptures, I usually I usually pray about that. But like finding something that really sticks out to you that's really strange like that, and then like just the idea of like stopping and taking that to Jesus and asking him for the answer, like for like clarification,
Right.
some sort of guidance. Like I don't know why that never occurs to me in those moments.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Like I do think it's different. Lord, well, I mean, I don't know. But yeah, I definitely know what you're saying though. There is a difference between like there's such an openness, such a wildness. Like one thing you said that I think was really interesting to think about in comparison to the Bible study aspect of it is not being afraid to look like a fool.
Yeah.
Like because I think that like a lot of times there are things that come up in the Bible studies, like things that like questions you might have, or things that stick out to you, or things that you're like, that you don't say because you think you might look silly.
Right.
But like we don't take that same
Right.
approach in like the worship side of it a lot of times.
Right.
I mean, or some of us
I was
do.
exactly
Yeah,
what I was
yeah,
going to say. Some people probably do.
yeah,
Or well, probably everybody does from time to time. But
yeah.
in that
I've done it.
in that moment, in those moments, you probably I don't even like the language of saying like you missed out or whatever, but you probably did, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a thing. Like, there's been times in worship whenever, I haven't done certain things where just because I was like, I'm gonna look silly, someone's gonna,
Yeah.
or like even, times whenever I felt like I had like a word for the church
Yeah.
or for some individual, like something that come to mind, and I was like, I didn't do it because I thought it would be weird,
Yeah.
you know.
Or if you're like me, I'm someone who's always trying to think like things have to make a logical sense, or it doesn't compute for me. So I'll be like, well, what would be the point in that? It makes no sense.
Right.
It's not logical. Well, I don't know. I mean, just because it's not logical to you doesn't
Right.
you don't know everything. You know what I mean? Like maybe
Right.
you can't put it together. So I don't know. In those moments, perhaps that's a hindrance, but it's also just the way I'm wired. So I didn't wire myself. I didn't put my own wires together.
Right.
So
But yeah, that's kind of like I've been thinking about that. I just kind of been thinking about how like I just really feel like I've been kind of like slacking in like certain aspects. Like I'm still reading and studying, but I'm not really that aspect of it. That like stopping, like the prayer and contemplation,
yeah,
and having those moments of like being like Jesus did. Like Jesus said he would oftentimes go by himself to pray to the Father. Like
right,
having those times whenever you just set aside time to just be with your dad.
right,
Like those. I've been neglecting that a lot.
yeah.
So
quit
that's
it.
something I've been thinking about.
Quit it.
Just stop, Sean.
Yeah.
Stop it.
The what is that? The whole 12-step program. The first step is to admit you have a problem, and now you've admitted it. So
Yeah.
now let's correct. Let's course correct.
Stop.
Why are you the way that you are?
Yeah. Yeah, but I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about, just the, like I said, the stuff with Jesus, and because all of that plays into everything that we've said. Like, let's say that my conception of Jesus is just way off.
Yeah.
Well, that affects everything, right?
Yeah,
As a Christian.
sort of.
Yeah.
Seems kind of important.
But at the same time, it's something I've been thinking about a little bit, but it's not really something that's been it's not really something that's been like bothering me,
Yeah.
because like I really do feel like, I don't, like I have a genuine conception
Right.
of Jesus. Like, if I can read, if I can go to like somewhere like Got Questions, like very Calvinist leaning website, and like they're saying this is who Jesus is, and I'm like, if I can agree with that, then like, all right. If both of us can agree, like surely there's some common ground here. Like
Right.
surely I know who Jesus is in this respect at least. But it's it's just something I've been thinking about, like the depths of who Jesus is, and like and how I don't want to get him wrong.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Jesus is for this and not for that, and like be wrong about all of that.
Right, and that sort of ties into something that I've also kind of been on here lately, which is just not holding so tightly to things, which is both it's kind of a double-edged thing, because I'm not saying that you shouldn't hold tightly to the things that are important to you and like your own conceptions, but what I mean by that is also acknowledging that there's a million other ways to see it, and that your way of seeing it is just one possible way. And that doesn't mean that your way's wrong, and it doesn't mean that you need to give up your way of seeing it. But you also don't have to necessarily force everyone to try and see it your way. And I've really been applying that with like scriptural studies, because I've always been very much it's either a this or that, a black or white, this or that. And I really tried to move from this or that to a yes and, of like, the scriptures, my understanding of what the scriptures says this, your understanding of that same scripture says this, which is different than my understanding of it. And it's not yours or mine, it's not this or that, but it's yes and. Like, they're both good readings, they're both very possible, and I don't know which one the original author had in mind. I don't know, blah, 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 blah. But what I do know is that the way you're reading it and the way I read it are different, but they both lead us in the right direction. They're both good readings.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to be, and not necessarily trying to force my interpretation or my understanding on people. I think it's good and helpful to have your own understanding and your own interpretation to help people to see what you're trying to say, but that doesn't mean that they have to only see it your way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? So I think that makes the scripture so much more alive and so much more applicable, and so it gives them such a profound depth when you quit trying to box it into this or that, and you're like, it's the way I understand this. I mean, and really it's just common sense, because how many times, I think Steve even said it on Bible Study Wednesday, about how you can be reading the same scripture over and over and over and over again, and the 150th time that you read that same scripture, you get something totally different out of it.
Right.
So then, of course, if we're talking about two different individuals reading it, you're probably going to get different things out of it. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. Like,
Right.
as long as, now, again, we've said this before too, there are bad readings.
Yeah.
And bad readings do need to be like exposed as bad, and in a loving way, of course.
Right.
But, shown why that's a bad reading. But there's also a million good readings.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes into the reason why I brought that up, is it's sort of a similar line of thinking of like, what Jesus said this, but we can read Jesus' teaching on something or Jesus' parable. You could read it, I could read it. We could get two totally different things, but they're both good readings. You know?
Or they're both bad.
They could be both bad.
Yeah. But yeah, and anyway. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I feel like I haven't really said much this podcast, this episode, and when I have spoken, I've added nothing.
Well, actually, it's kind of funny you say that because at the beginning I felt like I was adding nothing. You were talking about something, and I realized I was just listening and I wasn't like engaging with you. But it wasn't because I was just listening to what you had to say, and then I was like, "Wow, I'm not saying it." And this is going to be a podcast where Sean does most of the talking, and I'm just listening.
Oh, yeah, I felt the exact opposite. Like you've done all the talking, and I've added nothing to this episode. But
I mean, I am the star of the show, of course, but
see, I don't even know if that worked. I pushed one of the sound pad things, and I don't know if it.
you want me to do? It went.
Yeah, kind of like air letting out of a balloon, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well. One thing about doing a podcast with me is that I'm usually never short on words.
Yeah.
I'm full of hot air and bullcrap.
Yeah, I mean, we we haven't really. We didn't come into this one with a topic. We kind of intended to just do that, to just come in here and talk, and that's what we did. And
Yeah.
I thought it was fine. But
Yeah, well, even if the people hate it, I've had a good time with it. So
yeah, I mean, I think it was good. I mean, I think it was a good conversation. It was just a lot of stuff that, like, I've already said all of it, but like the Christian nationalism stuff, I'm not educated enough to really feel comfortable saying a whole lot about it, so I didn't say a whole lot about it. And then, I just feel like I haven't really.
I've only got one thing more to say about Christian nationalism.
Oh, gross.
That's it.
Ew. Is that what you have to say about it?
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that seems like a good note to end on. You want to just end it there?
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool beans.
Maybe next week. Hey, before we end off, everybody, my lord,
Easy.
please. Once this is uploaded, I'm going to share it on our Insta. I'll share it on Facebook. Share it, please. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, anything that you can do.
Please.
Please do it.
Please.
Our last episode.
Like.
Our last episode seemed to pick up steam with like views. I think that the new video format makes it easier to share. It draws people in. It's a little bit different sharing a video than it is just sharing like a link to a Spotify. And so I think it's engaging people, but just help us to get the word out there and engage with us, because that can give us content. Like if there's something that you want to, that you're interested in us talking about, a topic or something that you're wrestling with, that let us know, man. Send us a comment, send us an email, and let us wrestle with it for you and with you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I know for sure that likes get, that's how the algorithms work. The
Right.
more likes we get, the more it gets pushed out to people,
Right.
to more people. So, yeah.
But yeah, the more feedback that we can get, as far as like, it would make it probably could help us to make the show more engaging, because it helps us to know what you are interested in, what you want to wrestle with or talk about, and gives us ideas for topics and gives us more content to share with you guys. So yeah, just engage with us. But we love you. Even if you don't love me, I love you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
That was terrible.